Hi, welcome to this new episode of Peer Supportcast. Today we will be talking about the nexus between gut health and mental health. I have two wonderful guests with me today. I would like to invite you to maybe clean your room or wash your dishes while you watch this episode. It's always good to stay active if you don't want to interrupt your daily activities. Grab some coffee, grab some tea, make yourself cozy, and enjoy the episode. So, welcome. Thank you for joining today. Would you like to introduce yourselves and also explain what is your relationship with the topic that we're discussing today, maybe?
Yeah, do you want to go?
I can go first. Well, I'm Natalie. I'm a third year at AUC, and I've generally just had a very large interest in the gut microbiome over the past couple of years. I did an internship that specialized in the microbiome and using it to treat neurological conditions, and I also just did my capstone on HIV in the microbiome. And I've done some research in the past about mental health in the microbiome, so I'm really pulling from that knowledge database today.
So we have the expert right here.
Exactly.
We'll have the scientific input of the day.
The scientific input. And I'm Leia. I have no scientific input. For me, the nexus or the connection between brain and gut health, it's a little bit more personal. So the contribution that I have to this conversation is I've always had, I suffer from an anxiety disorder, and it really influences my digestive system. And a couple of years ago, I was diagnosed with this condition that's called GERD. And basically, to sum it up, it's extreme acid reflux. And it's something they usually find in elderly people, but there's research that shows that it can be found in people who are my age, and it's triggered by anxiety and by other mental health conditions. And so that's where my personal scientific information comes from. It's much more experience and just knowing that stuff and going through it. So, yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank
Absolutely.
you so much. I look forward to hear about all your insights.
Mm-hmm.
Would you like to... Let's to introduce the topic, explain briefly how the brain and the gut are connected. Why are we talking about this in the first place?
Yes, I can do this. I feel like I've practiced this so many times. Okay, well, the gut microbiome. The gut microbiome basically refers to microorganisms that live in your digestive tract, and there's a homeostasis that is maintained in this digestive tract between these microorganisms, and these influence your brain in a bidirectional way, both directly through the vagus nerve and production of neurotransmitters, and also indirectly through the immune system and metabolites that are produced when the bacteria break down food, in a way. And this is just a pathway, and the brain also influences the microbiome in some way. So it's basically a circular effect in a way. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it's reciprocal. It's a two-way connection.
So your environment can influence your brain and how you think, and that can in turn influence your digestive tract.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, even feeding more into that, it's this idea that at least when I started going to therapy, there was this inherent link that was established and clearly established between the gut and my emotions, in my mind, and what was going on up there. And for a very long time, I didn't used to make that link. And I don't think it's a link that people make very easily, and it's not only in terms of just your day-to-day, but also in terms of what you're eating, and what you're choosing to put into your body if you're exercising in order to allow your whole digestive system to function and things like that. There's all of that plays into it, as you were talking about your environment.
Yeah.
Mm. I'm just thinking, it's interesting that I think this connection that you say is not very much talked about or considered is something that is commonly discussed when considering kids. When you're a kid, you easily associate.
So
you understand when kids are upset because if they haven't eaten enough or they've eaten something that was bad for them, and then it's when we enter adulthood, we stop.
Yeah.
We stop taking that into account, and it's just like sleep. It's these things that have such a huge impact.
I mean, I don't mean to cut you off, but it just makes me think of I'll just feel like shit after eating a bunch of fried food, and for some reason I just will not think of it. It will not even cross my mind that it's you feel like crap because you just put crap into your body for so long. And exactly what you just said, as a kid, continuously your parents are like, don't eat too much candy, it'll make you feel sick, or if you haven't eaten well or haven't eaten right for a while, then you'll feel bad. And it's weird how that doesn't translate into adulthood, and that we don't take that seriously in the same way. Yeah.
Natalie, I wanted to ask you, maybe you could explain for people who are not very familiar with the microbiome that we have in our gut, explain what it is, what's its composition as well.
Yeah, so the term microbiome microbiota are the organisms that live in your digestive tract, and it's mainly comprised of bacteria, but there's also like viruses and fungi that inhabit them, and it's normal to have these species. Like normally when people are like, oh my gosh, there's a fungi in my digestive tract, that seems kind of weird, but a lot of these bacteria and viruses are beneficial and help us like maintain homeostasis in our body. And then the term microbiome, which is a level up from microbiota, I guess, also refers to like the products of these bacteria. For example, like carbohydrate metabolism from certain bacteria produces butyrate, and this is a essential component to regulating the immune system. So it also encompasses the metagenomic and metabolomic impacts of the microbiota.
And so, what determines an individual's microbiome and microbiota? Like, because I would like to check this with you, of course, because you're the expert here. But I believe each individual has different microbiotas, and those can be affected by genetics, but also your diet. So
for sure, there's so many individual factors. There is like a baseline composition that is like more or less the same. I can't remember the exact bacteria phyla that are more dominant in humans than others right now, but there are three main components, but also it is heavily influenced by individual factors. That's pretty much what I just wrote my capstone on. So diet is a huge factor, especially like fiber consumption. So fruits and vegetables, very good, you should eat them. And also geographical region is often tied in a lot. What I just looked at was African countries versus Western countries. In Western countries, a lot of people eat like really high processed diets and less fiber consumption, and therefore their bacterial diversity is less good in a way. And then a lot of African countries have staples in their diet that consist of high fiber foods, and this contributes to higher microbiome diversity in a good way. So those are just like two of the factors. There's so many others, like age, sex, like also things like stress can also have an impact as well. So it's a really complicated topic, which is why it's so interesting to me. Yeah,
I mean, we're learning a lot, so it's great. I wanted to ask you, you just said that it could contribute to the diversity of the microbiome in a good way. Is there a bad way in which can a diverse can have a lot of diversity within your microbiota be a bad thing?
There are certain like pathogenic or opportunistic bacteria or viruses that can inhabit your microbiome, and if there's increases in that, I think that's not good. It can like cause sickness. But in general, what we see a lot in conditions like depression, anxiety, and also other areas outside of mental health is that there's a decrease in microbiome diversity, and so a lot of research focuses on increasing that diversity.
So I guess that opens up a lead for a lot of possible treatments, right? Yeah,
for sure, such as probiotics is a very large area of interest right now.
So you said fruits and vegetables are a good way of kind of entertaining your microbiome and ensuring to have diversity in there. What are the behaviors that put yourself at risk of having a microbiome that is not diverse enough?
Like I just said, the opposite of that, which is like eating a highly processed diet and generally just not a very like diverse diet, and not healthy eating habits. And also I think exercise has also been linked to microbiome diversity just decreases in exercise, and not necessarily like, oh, I'm going to the gym for 3 hours a day, but just like going on like a half an hour walk. I think one study looked at that, and it increases microbial diversity. And it may also be like the influence between the two. Like if you're more active, you may be more likely to have a more healthy diet. But yeah, those are the two that I've read about in particular.
And so we've been discussing how there's like a bidirectional influence between the gut and the brain. So from what you say, we can easily understand that the state of your microbiome can lead to diseases because there's pathogenic bacteria that can develop.
Yeah.
And then how does that happen have you researched cases in which certain pathologies associated with the brain impacted the microbiome?
That's interesting. I personally have not done as much research on that. I mainly focus on, the gut going to the brain. And I think in general, like that's a lot of the papers that you read that are on depression or anxiety mainly talk about that one way, and then it's hard to really get the full picture if you're not considering the other pathway.
What do you mean by one way?
Like how the microbiome influences the brain, not how the brain
influences the microbiome.
Because you can find it, because it's first important to note that, I think you'll agree with me, but there's this field of research specifically on the nexus between gut health and mental health is very recent. It's something that we have a lot of knowledge on, like biological knowledge on the gut and the bacteria that exist there, but like this connection mind-brain is still currently being researched a lot. But then I forgot what was going to be my point, so I'm going to lead with another question I wanted to ask. I wanted to ask you talked about depression and anxiety. What other pathologies or conditions come to mind that are heavily impacted by your microbiome?
So the majority of research right now has been focused on depression. I feel like it's not as uncommon of a topic anymore. Like I know a lot of people know about this link between the gut microbiome and depression. Anxiety is a bit more new, and I think also bipolar disorder is something that's been coming into light more often. Those are the mental health conditions that I can think of. Well, I guess also in general there are some studies that show that the microbiome contributes to like higher levels of stress or not necessarily depression, but sadness on some level, just like decreased mood or like increased stress, not to the level of like clinical diagnosis. But also there's links to other neurological conditions like epilepsy, for example, and ALS, that the microbiome may have some contribution to pathology on that.
So is it common that if you have a doctor's appointment to discuss, let's say, some of those conditions, is it a common thing that the doctor suggests to have your gut analyzed? Or is it still something that...
I think it's still something that is, coming into practice more. It's not necessarily the first line of thought when, for example, you go to the doctor and you get diagnosed with depression. They're not going to automatically be like, oh, let's take a fecal sample and look at your microbiome. I think it's more like treating the brain first, but I think it's something that I don't know if you have different experience.
I have a different experience, and maybe it's because I have a different experience, and I grew up in South Africa, and so the doctor that I went to, and I thought that was also very odd. The first time I went to go see her, she was like, I need a stool sample, I need a urine sample, and I need to do a blood test. And it was because she wanted to basically check all of what was going on in my system in terms of like, was my mood being affected by my thyroid? Was it being affected by the amount of like,
that's it.
And also like checking as much, checking my stool, how much fiber I was getting into my diet or not. In terms of my blood, was I having deficiencies in certain vitamins, like vitamin D, vitamin B, and like iron as well. And so it meant that I went through all of these different tests to see not only with what I was eating, but what my body was like, I don't want to say like taking out, but like getting rid of what was it, where was the problem lying, and what was where was the issue. But I think that was the reason why, was because my case was, my symptoms linked to my depression, because I was diagnosed with depression in 2018, and the inherent link was very symptomatic. So it meant that because I was very depressed, I was also very nauseous and didn't want to eat, and had a lot of stomach issues and issues related to stomach. So that's the reason why she felt that was appropriate for me. So she not only did this test, but then also led me to a dietitian. But I don't necessarily know if, I've spoken to other individuals who've had not necessarily the same experience as me, but who've gone through depressive episodes and have been diagnosed, and I don't think that they've ever had their doctor be like, oh, give me all of these different things, a stool sample, a blood sample, a urine sample, so that I can see what's going in and out of your body, essentially. Yeah.
I guess it depends a lot on how the person is experiencing that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because as you said, for you it was very symptomatic.
Yeah.
Maybe for some other people, it's harder to maybe assess as an individual as well.
Yeah.
How maybe the things that you're experiencing at a bodily level, you can't pinpoint that. You don't maybe make the link yourself. Yeah. Between what you're struggling mentally and all these physical symptoms.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think in my case, it'd been something that had been existing for a long time. I'd had digestive problems before this depressive episode, and so it was something that was in the books, and so it was something that I was not only I was aware, but the doctors that I was going to were aware of as well. And so the link just made sense. The fact that I was anxious, and it made my stomach and my digestive system fuck up, basically, and then that as a reaction also then made me more depressed. So
I'm not sure if you said this already, but so did you, as an outcome of that, did you get a treatment that specifically targeted your gut health?
Yes. So basically, in 2018, I had my first bout of extreme acid reflux. And for those who, I feel like you guys know what acid reflux is, but it's basically you produce too much acid in your stomach, and which is normal. Your body does produce acid in order for it to break down food and to digest, but I just produce a little bit too much. And so it means that I get nauseous and cramping, and I also have a hard time eating food. And the first time I got it really severely was in 2018. And the medication that I started going on were called PPIs. And so they are this type of medication that essentially makes it so that there's less acid. I'm simplifying it, but it's so that there's less acid in your stomach, and so that you're not producing quite as much. And there was that then paired with antidepressants. And so it was the combination of both the psychological and the dietary that was put in together in order for me to then get better and feel better. And then obviously also the exercise bit, which I don't fucking do, but which is why my mood fluctuates. But the exercise was a big part. I used to walk every day for 45 minutes for a year. It was really impressive. I was really impressed. Then I stopped, but
So you saw benefits from those?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I took my medication regularly, I ate well, and I exercised every day, and I was a different person. I was doing very well. I was still depressed, but I was doing so much better. Now I don't exercise, and I see the consequences. So I recommend exercise. That's all I'm going to say.
Well, I think your condition itself makes it hard to stick to these habits, or not?
Well, no, and the thing is, I need to stick to those habits because the medication that I take, it's called esomeprazole, and it's a PPI that essentially you take 30 minutes before eating your first meal, and you have to take it every day. And so I have to take it before breakfast, which means obviously I've got classes or I've got work, so I need to plan eating breakfast into my schedule, at least 45 minutes just to eat. And so in theory, it should be something that I put into my plan, but I'm 21 years old, and I'm not this is usually a condition that you find in 70-year-old men. It's usually men because they usually, I don't know if you do studies like this, but they're usually the ones that have poor gut health. At least this is based on the doctors that I've gone to. They say this is usually what we see in old men who've been smoking and drinking their whole lives.
Higher acidity levels.
Exactly. But you need that regularity, that idea that you wake up at the same time, take the medication at the same time, exercise around the same time. That way your system can do better and work better, because it works like a machine. I know it's an odd thing to say, but at least that's the way that I've understood my own body, is that it works like a machine. And when I do something a little bit off course, it's wait a damn minute.
Yeah, but I hear you, and the only thing that comes to mind as a 21-year-old myself is that, of course, it's clearly different for people our age
Absolutely.
and our generation, because we're not in a moment of our lives where things are stable in any way.
Things are always changing.
Yeah. Always changing, always doing something different. So even with this condition that I have and this issue that I have, I always experience discomfort. That's just the reality of it. Even like sitting here now, I feel it, but I just have to go about it. That's just the way that you live, because I'm 21, I've got shit to do, you know? Like, I can't be taking my medication too regularly, and also, because the thing is, with having severe acid reflux, you're supposed to cut out a lot of things in your diets, because you don't digest them properly. It's like coffee and tomatoes and, you know, like that, like high acidity stuff. I'm not gonna do that. Again, I know it's not good, but I'm not. And obviously this then contributes to your mental health. Like, I'm not sitting here being like, I live this way, and say, oh yeah, then I don't understand why I don't feel well. Like, I don't eat well. Like, I know this. I drink coffee. I'm not supposed to drink coffee. And I smoke sometimes. I'm not supposed to smoke. But I understand that also contributes to it, the way that I feel, you know. I think one thing that we talk about in peer support is, and we have this thing called Food for Care, which is really about encouraging individuals to eat healthy, because we understand that if you're not eating well, even if you do all of the rest, even if you're exercising, getting enough sleep, if you are doing your work, if you're interacting, like socializing, all those things, your life is well balanced, but you're not eating well, you don't feel well. Yeah.
Well, thank you. Natalie, I would like to redirect the conversation back to you, because I would like to for us to try to explain the relationship between your gut and, more specifically, not your brain, but more specifically how it can interact with neurotransmitters. You've talked about it before, you touched upon it, and I just want to give you some space to explain how those two are linked.
Yeah, I can maybe explain more like the link between the microbiome and depression in general.
Yeah, that sounds good as well.
There's like so many different pathways that are potentially influencing. But yeah, for the neurotransmitters, there are specific bacteria that contribute in particular to the conversion of glutamate to GABA, which is really important for regulating emotions, and have been implicated in depression, anxiety, as gut dysbiosis has been implicated as a contributor to this decrease in GABA in a way. There's also indirect pathways, which personally I've done more research on, so I'm more comfortable talking about. The first is just inflammation in general. So when there's a lack of diversity in the microbiome, and in depression, I think it was Bacteroides, which is a specific phyla of bacteria, but they have decreases in patients with depression compared to like the general controls. And this is really important for maintaining inflammatory homeostasis, so controlling the production of cytokines. So when this is decreased in depression, then we see an increase of cytokine production and hyperactivation of the immune system, which is really interesting because depression produces symptoms that are similar to what's called sickness behavior. I don't know if you're familiar with that concept.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
It's like this is only for a specific type of depression as well. There's so much heterogeneity within depression, but when you're sick, you tend to want to eat less and sleep more. And these are also symptoms that we see a lot in depression. So in that way, it has been linked. And also, inflammation has negative impacts on the brain structure, and particularly the hippocampus. And hippocampal degeneration is something that is seen a lot in depression. So these are like some of the hypotheses of how inflammation, specifically through the decrease of certain bacteria, can influence your brain. And then also, in a way linked to this, is the production of butyrate, which is really an interesting topic to talk about because it's something that you can directly supplement. So certain bacteria, I think it's the Firmicutes phyla, this was so long ago, but are also decreased in depression compared to controls. And these are really important producers of butyrate, which is a byproduct of carbohydrate decomposition. I don't know if that's the word, but by bacteria. And it's an important regulator of the immune system. And also research has found that direct supplementation of sodium butyrate decreases depressive symptoms. Well, in animals, there's more research. There's more research coming out on humans. I think there are a handful of studies like from last year that are saying that it is also helpful in treating depression and anxiety in human patients. So yeah, that's a really interesting avenue to go down in terms of, dietary supplementation that you can use to increase certain parts of your microbiome and thereby treat depression. Yeah.
I want to ask one question. I don't want to steal your thunder. At some point you spoke about, I think it was 6 symptoms. What was it?
Sickness behavior.
Yes. And I think it's like, this is a term that I've heard before, but then in terms of like combating that, because when you're sick and you have like the flu, you get over the flu at some point, and your appetite comes back at some point because you want to eat, it comes back after like a week or two. In cases of like going through depressive episodes, those go on for a lot longer, and because we're talking about this inherent link between the brain and the gut and the gut and the brain, if one's sick, it just feels like it's a continuous loop where it's like on one side you're being told you need to eat, but at the same time you're like, yeah, but I don't feel like it. And then it's this idea that in order to feel better, you do need to eat, but at the same time you don't want to. I don't know if that's something that you explored or ever looked into.
Yeah, that's not something I personally have looked into. Not really my area of expertise. But someone who has struggled with mental health themselves, I also found that just forcing myself to go outside for like a certain amount of time a day, or like forcing myself to keep in that routine, it's really helpful for like I can't necessarily say that's like redirecting my brain to think it's not sick, but it's maybe a way you can influence your microbiome to like get out of this consistent loop. It's like breaking the cycle.
Absolutely.
In a way. Yeah.
I guess you're not only striving for homeostasis within your microbiome, but also just like a bodily homeostasis as well. So you were talking about inflammation.
Yes.
Is there because there's people who suffer from chronic inflammation, and so are those the people that are like most specifically targeted by supplements that
the supplements for decreasing inflammation, like butyrate, for example? Or, I think there are studies that like specifically focus on a subtype of depression where they observe like increased inflammation, because you can see that through the blood and like circulating inflammatory markers. And if I remember correctly, I think it is more effective for people who have chronic inflammation, just because it works directly against that to decrease inflammation.
Might be the cause as well.
Yeah, for example, that's really my extent of knowledge on that.
No, thank you so much.
Yeah.
And so, what about the connection between the microbiome and the immune system? I know you mentioned that you did some research on HIV, for example.
Yes. Well, it's a bit different for HIV just because there are so many other factors, like the other pathogen that impacts the microbiome. But in general, the microbiome is really important for like regulating the immune system just through the metabolites that it produces, and also signaling in some sort of way for upregulation or downregulation of inflammation. But the main thing that I have researched before is just the metabolites such as butyrate that are produced and therefore are regulating production of inflammatory cytokines. That's the word, yes.
So how does the microbiome interact? Like, what's the difference between, let's say, someone like a random individual and someone? What's the difference between the gut and the microbiome of a person who is healthy and a person who has HIV, for example?
Well, in HIV, it's really like about the balance of certain bacteria. Well, that's the main component of the microbiome. So in HIV, there's depletions of certain like phyla or species of bacteria that contribute to healthy immune regulation. For example, everything always relates to butyrate for some reason, but also in depression, there's a decrease of bacteroides, and this is also seen in HIV, and this is really an important producer of butyrate. And because these are decreased compared to like healthy levels, it just creates this like, they call it like pro-inflammatory microbiome, because it contributes to like increasing inflammation, rather than if a healthy person has like a healthy balance of all bacteria, they're able to produce enough metabolites to properly regulate their immune system. I don't know if that makes sense.
It does.
Okay.
It does. It makes a lot of sense. Still, yeah, I need some time.
It's a lot to wrap your head around.
Yeah. So, if we had to make a summary of the different advice that we could give to an individual, let's say to a viewer or auditor that is suffering from mental health pathologies or from physical symptoms associated with the gut as a result of mental pathologies, what could we recommend them?
Maybe you
I know we're not doctors, but
you can speak first from your personal experience, and I'll
then come in with what you have.
Yes, I'll talk about the research.
I think if it's something that's related to your stomach and your digestive system, I think that it's something that you should be taking. I honestly, at least for me, it's something you should be taking very seriously. And it's also, this other concept that I saw was a body that's fed, like it's an idea about feeding your body. Because sometimes you find yourself in a period in your life where that's all you can do, and that's perfectly fine, being able to get the nutrients in at some point, that there are some levels of anxiety or depression where you can't go further than just, all you can eat is a bowl of pasta. That's it, Yeah. But if you've reached a point where you feel like you can do a little bit more, then it's always good to strive to have a more diverse diet, to eat fruits and vegetables more than once a day. That's one thing that my experience has really taught me, is that it changes my complete experience just having like a fruit or two in a day, honestly, like a banana or an apple, or even just like a handful of grapes. It changes the way that I feel, and it changes the way that I go about my day. Another thing is also not being afraid to talk to your doctor and having that conversation about not only diversifying your diet, but talking about how your depression or your emotional pathology, or like the way that you are feeling emotionally, is impacting your digestive system, whether it be that you're feeling more nauseous, or that you're feeling more nauseous, or you're feeling uncomfortable, if you're feeling heartburn or cramping in your stomach. Those are type of things that you need to go and communicate with your doctor, because the reality is they not only pose a problem to you, but they also pose a problem to the way that you experience life, and then also your relationship with food. I think one thing that we didn't actually get the chance to talk about, because I feel like we're summarizing, but one thing we didn't get the chance to talk about is about the connection between the gut and the brain in relation to eating disorders.
True. And
also this idea that that in its on its own is a whole other conversation. Like we're talking about diet and eating, but if you're then talking about conditions where your relationship with food is really difficult, where it's not just about how you feel personally, but more so about how you feel towards food, and then again about how you feel your body is responding to food. That's also something that you need to talk to a specialist about. I think that's really what we're coming down to at the end of the day. There's only so much that we can recommend. If you feel that your situation or your condition is one that's gotten out of hand, it's always best to talk to a doctor, a psychiatrist, a psychologist, and if they can then refer you to a dietitian or someone who's knowledgeable in their field.
Clearly, because it's simple to, like, if you look at simply the science of it, you see that, you might be missing this X amount of bacteria in your microbiome, and therefore having a supplement might help, or just changing your diet towards, I don't know, if you're eating a lot of red meat, for example, and you're kind of forgetting about vegetables and fruits and lacking all these fibers. It can be easy at first to kind of encourage people to go do that, but then, as you said, like with a lot of eating disorders, it's much more the relationship that you have with food is much more complicated than that, and you really need the help of a specialist to overcome that.
Yeah.
Sure. And I think just talking to a specialist it's easy to like sit here and make generalizations about like, oh, people with depression this and then,
Yeah.
but everyone has like their own individual experience, and also like we talked about before, their microbiome is so individual and influenced by like age, diet, so many factors like that. So it's hard to like prescribe like general advice. That being said,
I will be giving advice.
No, but I think the two main areas of research for mental health and the microbiome right now are probiotics, and prebiotics to some extent, but probiotics, which are like supplements with live organisms in them, and they have been shown to, we talked about diversity of the microbiome before, so it can really help with that, and maintaining homeostasis. And then also we talked about butyrate, and sodium butyrate you can pretty much buy online as a supplement as well, and it's something you can do yourself to maybe try and help your microbiome and see if that is a route that works for you. But yeah, it's really hard to talk about like the topic as a whole when it's really individual to the person.
Yeah, you can't just make assumptions, and like you need to get that checked up in a way, because you can make estimations of what could be the reason why you're feeling this way, but in the end, as you said, like each person is different, and each microbiome is so unique that if you don't make the biological test, if you don't go through the medical tests, then it's hard to just recommend something.
That's very true.
Yeah.
I would also like to give maybe a more informal advice about people's relationship with food, mostly people our age or even younger, people that are entering adulthood, people that are starting to live by themselves. It's important to learn how to cook. and I say this because I've been through it, and I see a lot of people that don't necessarily do that step that is necessary to kind of explore all the possibilities that there is in cooking with a budget, because that's also that could also be an entirely different conversation, but it's for some people it's more difficult than for others to make sure that you're getting a very diverse diet. But my advice is to really try to make cooking fun, and make sure that first of all that you're eating enough, because well, that's pretty straightforward, but we're as the in our generation, like we're very busy, things are always changing, and sometimes we just, I don't know, we're so focused on deadlines. That happens to a lot of people. I've heard, like as peer support, we talk to a lot of people that in let's say in periods of finals they completely stop taking care of themselves. I go through that. I don't know if you guys can relate,
but for sure.
And on many levels, not only on diet, but and then of course it can have impacts on your mental health for the next few weeks, not only during finals. So it's important to take care of yourself. Anything that you would like to share? Maybe coming from personal experience.
Well, going off the cooking thing.
Yeah.
As someone, I've really struggled with disordered eating in the past, just because of, toxic track and field and like cross-country culture, that whole area. But cooking is actually something that really helped me like heal my relationship with food. So I also think it can work to that end as well. Like, just making these really, not fancy, but like you're taking control of your own food intake, and you're doing something. I enjoy it now, so you're cooking to enjoy it, and you're like, oh, now I want to eat this. So I also think it's really helpful on that front as well.
At least for me, cooking. I love how you guys are both talking about enjoying it. I don't. I know how to do it. I much prefer when people cook for me. But one thing that really helps is I'll put on a TV show or a video, and I'll watch it while I'm cooking.
Yeah.
And I'll make something healthy. Like, the thing is, I'm always cooking something that's good for me because I have to. But I'm always thinking of, like, putting on something so that I am passing the time. You know, I'll call somebody. And that's not only in terms of cooking, but also in terms of eating. I've heard that, like, obviously we talked about the idea of, like, gut and health, but there's some people who have difficult relationships with food because of how lonely it is.
Yeah.
The lonely experience of, like, not only cooking a meal by yourself, but also eating by yourself. So some people,
Yeah, I always call someone.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Like, calling somebody, I call people, but then I get really distracted and I get annoyed.
Yeah.
I get annoyed while eating. I'm like, okay, guys, let me call you when I'm done eating.
Yeah.
But I know some people, they'll watch videos of other people eating, or they'll, like, put something on or listen to something to make it so that it's a much more enjoyable experience versus, like, a task that you need to do.
Yeah.
You know.
I think I relate a lot to this because I personally don't like cooking if it's for myself. I think I like cooking for others or with others.
Yeah.
But for myself, it's like I also have this thing where cooking is really. I mean, we understand eating as, you know, in like our society we have this. They're a big part of our schedules, right? And kind of everyone follows a certain rhythm. That doesn't necessarily work for everyone, but we have this thing where, like, we're supposed to eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner at within certain time frames, so that it makes sense with the other activities, and also, like, I don't know, the time shops open, the time you have to go to work, the time you have to go pick up your kids, or yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So it's difficult as well, because sometimes when you're, let's say I was talking about finals, or when you're overly focusing on something, we all have priorities.
Absolutely,
right?
Yeah.
And it's difficult because sometimes you need to make time
to
right?
eat.
You need to make time. You need to make time to eat, or you need to make time for something else, and you will take the time that you would put into cooking or simply into eating.
Yes.
The amount of times I've rushed somewhere.
Yes.
Or, like, I haven't finished my food simply because I was late.
Yeah.
And I guess then that's a whole different conversation on how to just schedule your time and really give the time that it requires to eat, like, and cook, like, just because sometimes it's something that we do every day, and it's almost boring, right? Because it's like we do it all the time, and then you've done this same dish for, like, I don't know, the entire school year.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's so easy to just be like, I'll just skip this meal.
Yeah, exactly.
I'll skip this meal, and then you suffer from the consequences of that.
Yeah. All of a sudden you're hungry and upset.
Yeah.
And then it just goes downhill from there, right?
No, I'm such a horrible person when I'm hungry. To be honest.
That's the connection, the gut health that we didn't talk about. How angry people get when they're hangry. That's a real word. Hangry.
Yeah.
Hate that, honestly.
You were talking about the loneliness.
Yeah.
And there's this thing, like, there's this term that is very Gen Z, but I relate to it a lot, is I'm such an iPad kid.
Yeah.
Like, I don't call people, I think also because I don't really like people seeing me eat, especially if they're not eating themselves.
Yeah, fair.
Or I'm very self-conscious about the noises I make.
Yeah, fair.
But so I'm always watching, like, a YouTube video or something.
That is iPad kid behavior.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but it's I think I should talk about this more with people, because I do it practically every single time I eat if I'm not with people. Because when I'm with people, it's never something that I would do, you know.
No, like, you're not pulling out a video when there's your friend is sitting across from you, or, like, sitting in the corner. Like,
the thing, it depends on your cultural background as well, but depending on also, like, how things go in your household. But from where I come from, there's a big tradition of sitting at the table.
Yeah.
It's important to talk, and it's important to share things around the table, and really put every other, let's say, preoccupations aside for that eating moment. There's a bit sacred. I know that I'm French, but I grew up in Spain, and I know that in Spain, it's less of a thing. Like maybe it's more of a thing in summer or like for special occasions, but it's more common that family members don't eat together, but just which has its good things as well.
Absolutely.
I think rigidity is never a good thing in general, but I'm trying to come up with an advice that I would give to myself, because it's important, because it's almost like I can't eat if I can't watch a video.
No, but I think what it is you recognize, at least for me, because I experienced the same thing, and it's not only exclusive to dinner and things like that, but I don't think people, and this is a whole conversation on its own, but people don't talk about how adulting, at least in this society, is very lonely.
Yeah.
You know? It's a lonely experience that you come home to yourself, and if you're not in a relationship, you know, or you don't live with anyone, you come home to yourself and you cook for yourself and you go to bed by yourself, and then you wake up the next day and do that again, and then go out into the world. And even if you are like introverted, you know, and need that energy to come back to yourself, it's still a lonely experience, you know.
Yeah.
I think for my advice, I wouldn't recommend you stop. Not because I don't think that it's like a good or bad thing. I think it's just it's a human thing, you know, and it's a human behavior, and if it allows you to not feel self-conscious while you're eating, and for you to enjoy your meal, or for you to do what you got to do, I'm just like, we got to do what we got to do. You got to have that meal. The way that I'm seeing it is like you're cooking for yourself, and you made a meal that's good and healthy and has all the stuff that it needs. You watch a video on top of it, I don't think it's gonna it doesn't cancel each other out. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely.
So, yeah, that's my recommendation.
Yeah.
Because otherwise I'd have to reevaluate my behavior, and not because I don't think that it's like good or bad, but I just think that for my case, it just gets me through the day.
Yeah. Yeah, no, me too.
Any last questions?
Any last questions?
Final statements.
I would just like to say, first of all, thank you.
Oh, absolutely.
Thank you to both of you for sharing so much today. I would also like to invite specifically Natalie, who has a lot of studies and background research that you could refer to me, so that I could put it, let's say, in the description.
Homework cited list.
No, yeah, that'd be amazing. So that if people are interested in the topic and want to look more into the evidence, the academic evidence that there is out there, we can do that as well.
Yeah.
Because there was a lot of vulgarization in this episode, and we're aware of it, but we're just starting a discussion here. We're not solving everyone's health. Please share feedback on what you thought of the episode, so that we can improve. If we do a second season of this podcast, then we would love to hear about your thoughts and insights and how we can improve. That will be super valuable to us. And the next topic will be about the next episode will be about anxiety and the future, and how our generation more specifically deals with with this pressure of the future. So we will talk about eco-anxiety, we will talk about the pressure of the expectations that society has on us, but many other things. So check it out. This is the end of the episode. Thank you, and we'll see you in the next one.
Bye, guys.